Today I'm joined by Jared Stedel. He is our Chief Commercial Officer, and Dan Depler, our Vice President of Maintenance Procurement on the What Drives You podcast. Got a couple really fun topics today, I think. Fun in my eyes, maybe not outside transportation, but I think we've spent a lot of time talking about alternative fuels and kind of where things are at, but maybe haven't dove into the options that are present now, going to be present, and maybe that are going to take much longer to be present in the marketplace. And Dan, you and I had talked previously about this a little bit, and there was a really helpful graphic that we'll include with today's podcast. But if we could just start there, kind of talking through where we're at with diesel, where we're at with the other sources. I think that'd be a great place to start the conversation.
Yeah, and I want to give credit where credit is due. I think the graphic you're talking about was generated by NACFE, which is a group that PTI has participated in for a long time, but it does lay out really well kind of what we're up against with alternative fuels. And the reality is diesel is a really strong fuel source for us, and it's very mature. And so any alternative fuel source that we try to compare to diesel has some uphill battles in terms of efficiency, availability, and most importantly in transportation is cost.
Right.
Right now, obviously everyone is talking about battery electric, and it's a great alternative zero emission vehicle fuel source or energy source, I should say. But even long term, BEV is probably going to be less than 20% of the market overall, unless there are major breakthroughs in battery technology. But that's really where battery electric stands compared to diesel right now.
Okay. What about RNG? Let's talk about that one. I mean, let's just bump through the list as we talk about these. I think that's probably the next most viable option, right?
Yeah, and that's probably the most exciting for us here at PTI. We've been running CNG trucks since 2011. We can supplement that with RNG, which helps to create a negative carbon offset. And so for us, when we look at our sustainability plans, we want to keep our eye on what's available long term, but also not lose sight of what we can do right now. And RNG is one that we can do right now. Where it struggles against diesel is just in its availability. But for certain applications, it's a great alternative to meet sustainability goals right now.
Great. I think some of the other sources are items that I just love to talk through to learn more. I mean, obviously, I'm no expert at this, but you've done a little more research and have kind of dove in here. Jared, with our customer base, I think just being an educational entity alongside of this is really helpful. So, you just think about that, Dan. What about ICE renewable, hydrogen ICE, hydrogen fuel cell? Can you talk about some of those sources as well?
Yeah, I think, and we're in this graphic we're kind of lumping RNG in that ICE renewable.
Okay.
And so the other one in there would be biodiesel.
Okay.
But just from a cost to produce, we're focused more on RNG.
Okay.
And once you start looking at hydrogen, what is still the most problematic about hydrogen is the infrastructure related to hydrogen is just absent across a national network.
Okay.
And so that's where we see the biggest challenge with hydrogen in the near term.
Okay.
And whether it's hydrogen ICE or it's fuel cell, the lack of hydrogen infrastructure and the cost to produce it is still not even close to being competitive with diesel or RNG at this point.
Okay. So Jerry, what are you hearing from customers in regards to kind of focus on this? I know sometimes I feel like we kind of lead the way into this, and other times we're maybe hearing some real desire for these types of fuel sources. I mean, what are you seeing out there with the marketplace in regards to this?
Yeah, I would say in general, just about every shipper that I talk to is interested in lowering their carbon footprint and achieving their sustainability goals. Many of them have gone so far as to state their goals, and to state what type of achievements they want to have by a certain year, whether it's 2025 or 2030. So they almost to a letter all want to achieve their goals, and they have goals in place. However, many of them are looking for guidance as to how they get there. And certainly there's many different fuel options, and probably the most talked about option right now is the BEV or battery electric vehicle. And to Dan's point, there's not a lot of applications for that. So I think right now customers are very interested in learning more, Keith, but many of them aren't as familiar with how they can deploy the fuel source, but then most importantly, what application, what mode of transportation is it best suited for. And oftentimes that leads us down into the discussion of how you can deploy natural gas, or how you could potentially deploy battery electric vehicles or other alternative fuels.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, as we've thought about this as an organization, we've typically taken that lead from the customer, I think, and I think that's where we started years ago, and I think that continues to be kind of our mindset around it. But outside of that, where do you see kind of each source kind of stabilizing or kind of growing from? I mean, when you talked about electric, it's even an option for up to 80% of the market long term. Where does that fit best? Where, with infrastructure and hydrogen being an issue, where does that possibly fit into the future, Dan, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the answer is easier on the electric side. It's
Okay.
going to be short haul, urban environments, maybe lower weights, drayage type environments.
Okay.
Hydrogen, why that's difficult is, again, just kind of back to that infrastructure.
Okay.
You have to be near the source of hydrogen production, because there is no national pipeline
Okay.
to transmit this. And that's where the added cost comes in.
Right. Talk about, ICE renewable or RNG, CNG in that regard. I know there are some of the same limitations, so that's not going to work in every instance.
Yep.
But we just talk about the usable instances where that actually does work and can work.
Yeah, and so I guess I would break it into feasibility versus is the infrastructure there or not. And
Okay.
something like RNG, it has a higher feasibility. It is can be a little bit more expensive, but it's not to the level where hydrogen is.
Okay.
And so that's probably why you've seen CNG or RNG develop at a faster rate than what hydrogen is, simply because it is closer comparable to diesel as far as meeting all of the benefits that diesel does have.
Right. Good. Last, I kind of want to jump back into diesel. And we talked about that's the biggest uphill battle to be against with any alternative source. What things, when you're thinking about carbon footprint, what things with diesel can a carrier be doing to be better in that regard as well?
Yeah, and the thing that I'm most proud of PTI or really any fleet that participates in NACFE as well is the focus that they put on fuel efficiency with diesel being the fuel source. And so whether that's speccing the equipment, but let's face it, we can all spec the equipment similarly.
Right.
Where I'm most proud of from a PTI standpoint is our drivers, and our drivers really embracing that idea of sustainability and being best in class in how they produce, their MPG.
Okay.
I would put our drivers up against any driver out
Right.
there.
That's awesome.
And that's what I think gives us advantage there.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think having the driver be the captain of the ship and be responsible with their fuel usage, that type of behavior can be applied when diesel's the fuel. And it can also be applied in the other applications too. Conserving
Right.
natural gas as a fuel is impacted by the driver and their skills, but also from a BEV perspective, the driver does matter on how long that battery power is going to last. I just circling back, I completely agree with Dan that BEVs should and will be deployed first
Right.
in the drayage environment, and that drayage environment can consume a great deal of that capacity.
Okay.
if not all of that capacity for many, many years to come. I think another application of battery electric could be in yard movements where natural gas isn't a great source for that type of movement. PTI is exploring and can price yard moves with BEVs. So we're excited about that type of opportunity. But really, and I think Dan's mentioned NACFE a couple times, I'll reiterate, they are best in class for really establishing the standards that carriers should apply.
Right.
And then also they've stated publicly that it's going to take all fuels, all the alternative fuels. And I think one of the things that's exciting about natural gas now, compressed natural gas, renewable natural gas, it's the same engine, it's readily available, and the infrastructure is there in most of the areas where we can deploy it. And we're ready to deploy it across dedicated fleets today, where weight isn't a restriction for us in that regard, and neither is range.
Great. Awesome. You guys both kind of segued into your next topic today, and that's really the captain of the ship, the driver, right? And my first question in that regard as we shift there, really maybe geared towards you, Jared, is why is the driver important to the customer? Like, we think about it a lot as the carrier, but why would it be important to the customer as well?
Yeah, I mean, they are the most important thing, if you ask me. They're our face. They represent PTI with, in many cases, our customer's customer.
Right.
And how they act, how they behave, how they park, how they unload, how they interact, that's all going to be judged in many cases on that initial first impression and that first delivery. And one of the things that I pride myself in representing PTI is we want to make sure that that first delivery goes off perfectly.
Right.
So we're going to apply a very stringent selection process to ensure that that is the case, because the driver really represents our customer in many cases to their customer, or an important stakeholder within their company. And we want to make sure that we get it right the first time, the last time, and every time in between.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on that one as well, since that's kind of my area of focus here at Paper, and here at PTI, and I just think if you're not applying science to how you hire, right, I think that's a problem, and I think maybe counterintuitive to the industry to do that and use behavioral assessment testing, which we do here, but that's something that between that and the guidelines that we follow, I think are just imperative to the success of our workforce, the quality of our workforce, the customer service focus, the focus on and value of safety here at Paper Transport. So 100% in agreement with what you're seeing, Jared. It's a big deal, right? And having the wrong person in the seat has a bigger impact than anything else, right? Dan, you said anybody can spec a truck, right? Not every driver is the same, and that I believe is 100% the case.
Well, I would agree. I mean, we use science and planning and optimization tools. We use science and freight selection. We use science and tendering freight and pricing freight. We use science and the engine and all the technology. Why shouldn't we use it in the driver selection process?
Yep. Awesome. Talking back to the connection of driver to MPG, I think that's where, Dan, you talked about a little bit in regards to the humongous impact that the driver has on that. For us, we've really tied the incentive, to their performance in that regard, to their ability to be efficient. Can you just spend a little bit more time on that and kind of how we, how we or how carrier could think about that, a customer could think about that in regards to the driver?
Yeah, I think what we decided long ago is we recognize that the driver has a 30% impact on how efficient that vehicle operates. And so we wanted to make pay and compensation based on their ability to operate that ship correctly. And that is what has given us the ability to have such strong MPG relative to our peers. Now, I will tell you, we pay for that through driver pay, but it's the right thing to do for that driver. It's the right thing to do for the environment, and something we're proud of our MPG compared to other fleets.
Good, awesome. So my next kind of shift with the driver focus is in regards to kind of coaching, as well as safety spec and safety components within the truck. So, you know, as we dive into that, and I'll chime in here too, you know, it's kind of my area of focus again, but when you think about, you know, the spec of the truck, you know, inward, outward facing cameras, driver coaching, driver behavior, you know, what do you think the best fleets do in regards to those types of items?
I think, simply put, they are actively coaching.
Right.
And if you don't have the cameras, you have nothing to actively coach besides responding off of maybe driver complaints that are few and far between.
Right.
So, you know, with the cameras that we have the ability to engage with that driver when we see behavior that could be enhanced.
Right.
And that, you know, as it relates to whether it's fuel or safety, following distance is a big piece of that for both of those.
Right.
So I think that's an area of focus for coaching that most fleets could probably improve upon.
Right. Good. Yeah, I debate this one pretty often with large and small carriers, right? I 100% have the same belief, Dan. And when we talk about inward, outward facing cameras, right? I mean, it's a big deal. And 7, 8, 10 years ago, it was a bigger deal, you know, for a workforce that maybe wasn't so acclimated with it. But now, I think the workforce has accepted it, and it's used as a great tool to exonerate, improve rightful behavior with the driver in those really bad circumstances of an accident. But in addition to that, you know, having that inward facing unit to me is really the only true way to coach, right? I mean, I think you can try to coach without it, but the ability to do that and know what's going on inside that cab, I think is paramount. And I think it can provide immense value to the customer as well. So, you know, Jared, as you think about that, you know, why does safe operation matter to a customer? You know, how can that connect, you know, with their core focus, maybe their bottom line, the delivery, the service, all those things?
Well, sure. I think, well, first and foremost, I think people generally want to be safe holistically, and that's their viewpoint. But I think when you boil it down to protecting that which we move for them, and you know, many customers are observant, especially shippers, of what other transportation providers are doing, and you know, of course, we have our logo, you know, going down the road, and in some cases, we might be pulling the shipper's logo behind us, and so, you know, clearly we have to protect their brand. But in most cases, we're pulling our trailer and behind our truck and their products in there. And I think in many cases, our shippers know what carriers they utilize, and they want to make sure that they're doing their part in selecting a safe provider. And so, you know, when we're not passing them on the freeway and going the speed limit that we're required to go, I think that plays a big role in winning business and reassuring them that we're going to keep the motoring public safe. And, I think it's less even about their product as much as it is about everybody else in the road and just doing the right thing. It goes back to the hiring practices, right?
100%. Hey, thank you both for joining today. It's a great conversation, and look forward to talking next time. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss further, drop it in the comments, and we'll be sure to hit that sometime in the future. Thanks so much.